The sun had barely risen when Oliver Walker hurried out of his luxurious apartment in the city centre. Wearing an impeccable suit and carrying an expensive leather briefcase, he walked briskly through the still sleepy streets. Oliver was a brilliant 32-year-old lawyer, known for his sharp intelligence and dedication to his work. Since graduating with honours from law school, his career had quickly taken off. As he walked, Oliver observed the people around him with a mix of indifference and disdain. His gaze lingered for a moment on a ragged man sleeping on a park bench. Another one who chose the easy path of drinking, he thought, shaking his head in disapproval. Oliver firmly believed that everyone was responsible for their own destiny. To him, homeless people were simply lazy or addicted, lost causes that didn't deserve his attention or compassion. Arriving at the imposing building where his office was located, Oliver greeted the doorman with a quick nod. He was eager to dive into another day of intense work. He could hardly wait to analyze the cases awaiting him, craft brilliant strategies and impress important clients. This was the world he knew and mastered. However, as he approached the entrance, Oliver almost tripped over something, or rather, someone. A man was lying right in front of the door, curled up under a pile of cardboard. Oliver felt a wave of irritation. How could the doorman allow something like that? He was about to step over and completely ignore the inconvenient figure when something caught his attention. A small metallic object glinted on the man's dirty and torn coat. Oliver frowned, leaning in a little to see better. It was a silver brooch shaped like scales, the symbol of the law school where he himself had graduated. His heart raced. Who was this man? Reluctantly, Oliver stepped closer. The smell of alcohol and dirt made his stomach churn, but he forced himself to take a closer look at the bearded and aged face. It took a few seconds for recognition to hit him like a punch. "Professor Miller?" Oliver murmured, incredulous. The man stirred, slowly opening his eyes. He looked at Oliver with a confused expression, taking time to focus. When he finally seemed to recognize him, a flicker of shame crossed his tired face. Oliver Walker," he said in a hoarse voice. "It's been a long time." Oliver was in shock. There, lying at his feet like any beggar, was Jonathan Miller, one of the most brilliant and respected professors he had ever known. The man who had inspired his career, who had challenged him intellectually like no one else. The master of legal ethics, whose passion for law was contagious. "Professor, what happened to you?" Oliver stammered, still trying to process the surreal scene. Jonathan looked away, clearly embarrassed. "Life, my young friend. Life happened," he replied bitterly. Oliver didn't know what to say. His mind spun, trying to reconcile the image of the brilliant and elegant man he had known with the pathetic figure before him. How could someone so intelligent and talented end up like this? At that moment, Oliver's phone rang, reminding him of an important meeting. He hesitated, torn between the urgency of work and the shock of the unexpected encounter. I have to go," he said, feeling guilty. "But can we talk later? Can I help you in any way?" Jonathan gave a sad smile. "Don't worry about me, Oliver. Go." With a heavy heart, Oliver entered the building. But throughout the day he couldn't concentrate. The image of the professor fallen on the sidewalk haunted him. That night, lying in his comfortable bed, he couldn't sleep. He remembered Jonathan's inspiring classes, how he spoke about justice and ethics with such fervor. What could have happened to lead him to this situation? In the following days, Oliver couldn't stop thinking about the professor. He decided to investigate. He discovered that Jonathan used to visit a nearby shelter for meals. One afternoon, after work, Oliver went there. The place was simple but clean and organized. Volunteers served soup and bread to a line of people. Oliver felt out of place there with his expensive suit. But he soon spotted Jonathan, sitting alone in a corner. He approached cautiously. "Professor Miller, can I sit down?" Jonathan looked up, surprised. "Oliver, what are you doing here?" I came to see how you are, Oliver replied, sitting down. Professor, what happened? How did you end up like this? Jonathan was silent for a long moment, stirring the soup without eating. When he spoke, his voice was laden with sadness. Do you remember that scandal a few years ago? The harassment accusation? Oliver nodded. He vaguely recalled rumours about a student who had reported the professor. At the time, everyone knew it would be practically impossible, coming from Miller. They even thought the case wouldn't progress, but it did. Well, that destroyed my life, Jonathan continued. The university removed me immediately. No one wanted to hear me, no one believed me. I lost my job, my reputation, everything. Oliver listened, stunned. But what about the trial? Didn't you defend yourself? Jonathan gave a bitter laugh. Defend? Against the daughter of one of the biggest donors of the university? Against a narrative everyone seemed eager to believe? I didn't stand a chance. As Jonathan recounted his story, Oliver felt a mixture of horror and indignation growing within him. The professor explained how the accusation, even without concrete evidence, had spread like wildfire. How colleagues and friends distanced themselves, fearing association with the scandal. How gradually he lost everything: job, home, savings spent on lawyers. The worst of all, said Jonathan, his voice choked, was losing faith in justice, in the system I loved and taught, in humanity. Oliver was shocked. How could something like this happen? How could such a brilliant and upright man be destroyed by an accusation without evidence? Professor, you need to fight, Oliver exclaimed. I can help. I can represent you. Reopen the case. But Jonathan shook his head, disheartened. No, Oliver, it's over. I don't have the strength for that anymore. I don't believe anyone will care after all this time. However, Oliver didn't give up. In the days and weeks that followed, he dedicated all his free time to investigating the case. He talked to former colleagues, sifted through old files, searched for any information that could help prove the professor's innocence. It wasn't easy. Many people didn't want to talk about it, fearing involvement in something controversial. But Oliver persisted. His determination only increased with each obstacle. One day, finally, a light emerged. A former classmate, moved by the story, remembered something crucial. On the day the alleged harassment occurred, there was an important seminar at the university, and this seminar had been filmed. With his heart racing, Oliver managed to locate the recording, and there was the evidence he had been seeking. Jonathan Miller, clearly visible, participating in the event at the exact moment he was accused of harassing the student in his office. Armed with this evidence and all the information he had gathered, Oliver filed for the case to be reopened. It was a tough battle. The time elapsed, the university's reluctance to admit a mistake, the fear of a new scandal. Everything conspired against them. But Oliver didn't give up. He used all his skills as a lawyer, all his passion for justice. He called witnesses, presented evidence, argued tirelessly. Eventually, he succeeded in having the case re-examined. The day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed. Jonathan, still frail but now clean and properly dressed thanks to Oliver's help, trembled slightly next to the young lawyer. As the evidence was presented, a growing murmur spread through the room. The seminar recording was the final blow. When the judge finally declared Jonathan Miller's innocence, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an eruption of applause. Jonathan wept silently, decades of pain and injustice finally finding some relief. Oliver, with tears in his own eyes, embraced his former professor. "It's over, Professor," he said softly. "You're free now." In the days that followed, the story dominated local headlines. The university was forced to issue a public apology. But for the professor, more important than any financial compensation was having his reputation and dignity restored. For Oliver, the experience was transformative. He realized how much prejudice and preconception he had in his heart, how often he had judged people without knowing their stories, without understanding their struggles. Determined to make a difference, Oliver began to dedicate part of his time to pro bono causes, helping people who couldn't afford legal representation. He started looking at homeless people with more compassion, understanding that each of them had a story, that circumstances often beyond their control might have led to their situation. Jonathan, slowly, was recovering. With Oliver's help and that of other former students touched by his story, he secured an apartment and began rebuilding his life. Although still shaken by the traumatic experience, he started mentoring again after nearly a year, with his brilliant mind, and now with a unique perspective on justice and compassion. One afternoon, months after the trial, Oliver found Jonathan having coffee in a square near the courthouse. The professor smiled as he saw him approaching. "Oliver, my boy, sit down with me." Oliver sat, noticing how Jonathan seemed healthier and more at peace. "You know," the professor began, "I used to think I taught ethics and justice, but you gave me the greatest lesson of all." Oliver frowned, confused. "What do you mean, Professor?" Jonathan looked at him with eyes bright with emotion. "You taught me about faith, Oliver. Faith in humanity, faith in justice. When I had already given up, you believed in me. And that changed everything." Oliver felt a lump in his throat. "You inspired me to become a lawyer, Professor. It was the least I could do." "No, Oliver," Jonathan said softly. "What you did was extraordinary. You didn't just save my life. You gave me back my dignity, my faith in what I always believed and taught." The two sat in silence for a moment, watching people pass by in the square. Oliver thought about how his view of the world had changed, how he now saw potential and value in every person, regardless of appearance or situation. "Professor," he finally said, "you taught me more than law. You taught me to see beyond appearances, to fight for the truth even when it seems impossible. You taught me the true meaning of justice and compassion." Jonathan smiled, his eyes welling up. "Then, my dear Oliver, it seems we continue to learn from each other, and that in the end is what really matters." As the sun set over the city, professor and student continued talking, sharing ideas and dreams for a more just world. And Oliver knew deep in his heart that the experience had changed him forever. That from then on, he would be not just a better lawyer, but a better human being. Someone who would look beyond appearances, who would fight tirelessly for truth and justice. Someone who would never again walk indifferently past other people's suffering. Because now he understood, all of us one day may be the only hope for someone who has lost everything. And at that moment, what really matters is not the position we hold or the money we have, but the compassion in our heart and the courage to make a difference. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.